Good evening, and we're so excited again to have you be a part of our great month of mental health awareness and conversation on the things that the church should be speaking on and speaking to and giving directions as well as healing for and in. And so today we're going to be dealing with our signs, symptoms, and risk factors of mental health. And we're so excited again to have with us our special guest, evangelist Tracy Hunt, who's a behavioral health and she's a specialist in alcohol, substance abuse. She deals with behavioral health, and we're so excited we enjoyed her on last week. And we're going to continue the conversation on some of the things that are considered as signs and symptoms, and then deal with some risk factors to help us. And again, welcome.
Welcome, thank you.
So glad to be with you
It's
again.
good to be here. This is such a sensitive subject, especially dealing with your loved ones and your different communities and things like that. Is a sensitive. No one wants to, talk about mental health, especially when it's in your own family. Those are things that we like to keep private. Those are things that we don't want anyone to know because of the label. But there is help. There is help out there, and we're actually, when we're talking about this, we're going to look at the natural as well as the spiritual, because there is help out there. You just have to reach out. And so, what I want to try to focus on right now is signs and symptoms. And a little later in the segment, we're going to talk about risk factors and how we can help our loved ones or even help ourselves. Because sometimes we, in our own self, are struggling with some form of mental illness and don't want to speak about it. Again, because of the labels, you don't want someone to focus on you and look at you and say, oh, something's wrong with her or something's wrong with him. But we all struggle. We all struggle with something. And, there's minor mental illness, there's major mental illness. And then there's sometimes mental illness that sometimes we look at as beyond control. And I will talk about that in one of the scriptures coming from Matthew 8:28, if you want to find that. I'm not talking about it now. But some of the signs and symptoms that I kind of outlined for us is the first sign and symptom that we're going to look at is the feeling of anxiousness or worried. And sometimes we'll say worrying about something. That's normal. We worry. Yes, we do. But sometimes worry and stress can become so anxious. You can become so anxious and it turns out to be anxiety. And we don't understand the anxiety because we're worried about something and it seems to be normal. But symptoms of anxiety can include heart palpitations, shortness of breath, headaches, sweating, trembling, feeling dizzy, restlessness, and a racing mind. Your mind is always going, and you can't stop it. So that feeling of anxiousness can be a sign that you are struggling with anxiety disorder. And so when you notice that, or if you notice that even in yourself, try to slow the pace down. Talk with someone, because you may need help in that area. You may need counseling. You may need guidance to help you kind of slow the thoughts down, the racing thoughts. Slow yourself down before you cause yourself to have a heart attack or a stroke. And those are some of the symptoms that one of the signs and symptoms that people don't look at as a mental health disorder.
Now, to slow down, if we pause there for a minute, could that be, as we talked about in our other segments, like breathing, taking
Yes.
chances to divert your mind on maybe a picture, or put yourself around maybe water, or get to a tranquil position?
Yes.
So that's healthy then.
That's healthy. Some people will call it the woo-saw moment, where you just take a woo-saw, but it's just taking the time to breathe. Taking the time to put your focus on something positive, as Pastor Overseer was saying, and that can help kind of relieve the anxieties and the anxiousness. Another sign and symptom is the feeling of being depressed or unhappy. And signs of depression include being sad or irritable for a few weeks or more, lacking in motivation and energy, losing interest in a hobby, or being teary all the time. And sometimes we may look at depression as being, I'm just exhausted or I'm just tired. Sometimes that's not the case. Even though being exhausted and tired is real, that's not the case sometimes. Sometimes when you lose interest in things that you loved, when you don't have the motivation, and this sometimes come with women. We don't have the motivation to get up and clean like we used to, or get up and cook, or get up and do laundry. We don't have that motivation to treat ourselves, to pamper ourselves. We don't have that motivation to conversate and different things. So those are things to watch for. We're laying around all day. We're don't want to get up, we're lollygagging around, getting up late for work. When you're coming home from work, you're jumping back into bed and you're just not interacting with anybody. Those feelings of being down. Those are feelings, those are signs and symptoms of having depression, which is also a mental health disorder. And there is help out there for that. And sometimes just taking the time to talk with a loved one, or taking the time to talk with a friend, can sometimes relieve that. But when it has gotten so deep, you may need to now have a clinician or therapist that can help guide you through that.
I know in my profession as a funeral director, like for instance, men, if they lose their wife or even their best friend, and or I've noticed like men who retire and then they have no outlet anymore. They don't go away, so they don't want to go fishing. They don't want to hang around with the bowling alley. They don't want to go to baseball. And so those are some things to look at too, even as men,
Yes.
how we could lose our initiative to move forward when things have been taken from us, or we are just not any longer in that same routine. For instance, even as a pastor, you have pastors who retire, and if all they did was just go to church and deal with church things, now when that's gone, they're lost. And so if there's no other hobbies, that's why I encourage men particularly to be more than just one trend setting.
Yes.
Pick up a hobby,
Yes.
fishing, bowling, tennis, walking, and then get around other people who are walking and fishing too. Don't just do it by yourself,
Yes.
but find something else that could be lifelike.
That's great. That is good insight, because men don't always talk about
True.
their issues. Men don't
True.
always show a lot of emotions, and we know that men are they're emotional beings.
True.
But they don't always display their emotions, or they don't always have conversations about it, and they just go off somewhere and they just drift off. And then once somebody recognizes it, they're so late in the game that it's difficult to now pull that individual out, and they have acquired other mental illness disorders on top of that depression, because they haven't dealt with what they were dealing with.
That's good.
Emotional outburst is another sign. Everyone has different moods, but sudden and dramatic changes in mood, such as extreme distress or anger, can be a symptom of mental illness. All of a sudden, that I can say, for instance, that overseer, never hear him have an outburst, or never hear him in distress, and all of a sudden he's in church and he's bringing a message and he's like angry, just angry. I'm gonna be like, whoa, something's off. So now we that know him, that know to reach out, will reach out. But you're sitting at home with your children, or sitting at a workplace with your coworkers, and you know that this person is happy, jolly all the time, and all of a sudden this individual walks in at work and they're sitting there, they're not talking, they're not speaking, and the moment you go over, and normally this person is joking, but you go over and you joke with that person, and all of a sudden they're angry and they're yelling at you, and you know what, why don't you just stop playing so much, and you're always just going so much, why don't you just go do your work? Something's off.
Truly.
Something's wrong, because normally that individual is a happy person. But all of a sudden you're just outbursting, and now you're seeing this pattern all the time, or you're seeing this pattern in your children. They're coming home from school and they're just angry all the time, and you're sitting at the dinner table and they're angry all the time. They wake up angry, they're showering angry, they're eating dinner angry. Something is off. Now it's time for you to get involved.
Wow.
Before it's too late, because you don't know what's going on. It could be bullying at school. It could be they're struggling in school work. It could be someone struggling on a job, someone coming to work having so many issues at home. There could be domestic violence at home, but they're coming to work and the happiness has worn off because now the abuse have gotten to be worse. Or there's just, they're dealing with sickness at home, dealing with illnesses at home where they're taking care of a parent. We don't know, but those are signs that we need to be looking for in individuals. All of a sudden when the change stop, we need to get involved with that.
A lot of times, and I'm glad you're outlining for us these things because it's hard sometimes to understand someone going through a mental health crisis. And what you've helped us with in these past conversations have been helpful even for me to not necessarily just look forward in a person, but also look forward, because sometimes we could be so unconscious, if you will, of the routine of a person.
Yes.
I thought about something and it's amazing. I'm laughing because the Lord gave me this scripture before we got together, not knowing that you're going to bring this in. So I'll wait till I get to that part. But it's amazing at how in the church, growing up, you and I both know, there was a time where anger in a pulpit by a man of God was just not looked upon as depression. It's like, oh my God, so we got to do what we got to do. And we're not understanding that that person's going through a crisis.
Yes.
Or that something really is going on.
Could
or there
really
could be a
on.
lady, a missionary or a saint who used to testify and sing, and now they're singing off key or singing loud or always doing something. They could be going through something at home.
Yes.
There could be something going on at home and we don't pick up on it. And the first thing we do in the old church, and I'm not knocking it, please, I hope my pastor friends that are watching me don't get mad, but everything can't be blessed all and pray real fast and say, be healed and you're going to be all right. But we need to pay attention to the signs so they can be all right.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
And something like that example you gave of the woman singing in a choir, that could be a sign of anxiety.
True.
So, so being observant and recognizing the change in someone could help someone early so that they don't have to go through such a significant extensive mental health crisis before we notice that something is wrong. Another sign is sleep problems. And lasting changes to a person's sleep patterns could be a symptom of a mental health disorder. For example, insomnia could be a sign of anxiety or substance abuse. Sleeping too much or too little could indicate depression or a sleeping disorder. Someone that sleeps all day, someone sleeps that's off, or they're constantly awake, and you know that this person is normally an individual who gets their rest, but they're up all types of the night. Again, I give the example with my daughter. When my daughter first started dealing with mental illness, struggling with mental illness, my daughter was seeming like she was up 24 hours a day at 2 and 3 days, not getting sleep. And you see the sleep deprivation in her. And you would try to just encourage her to go to sleep. There were times that I would have to sleep with her. And there were times that she crawled into bed with my husband and I just to get sleep. Why? Because she had a fear. She had a tormenting fear. And she couldn't sleep unless she was up under my body. And so, and we're talking, she's grown, she's 19, 20, 21. She's been going through this. So she would sleep literally up under my body, or I would go and sleep in her room and she would sleep up under my body. And then she would get a little bit of sleep. So just noticing that someone's sleep patterns are off. She was sitting on the stairs the whole night, just sitting there. And then in the morning time, she would try to lay down and go to sleep when it's light because she had terrors, night terrors. She had, being tormented and different things. So noticing someone's sleep pattern is off is very important, because there could be nightmares that we're not aware of. There could be fears that we're not aware of, torment that we're not aware of. And you noticing that their sleeping pattern is off and they're walking around looking like a zombie because they're so exhausted. Notice those things. Sometimes we'll look at them, oh, you better go get some sleep. No, that's not I can't sleep. I really can't sleep. They won't tell you that, but they may not say anything, or they be like, that's easier said than done, and stuff like that. Pay attention to those signs because we don't know. You want to interject on that, Pastor?
That's good. I have also found persons in my family, whether it's age, we always say when people get older, they don't need all that sleep. I have children who, I have one of my children, of all six of them, they could be up all night, and either they're playing their games or they're on the phone loud, and I'm trying to go to bed. I'm in the bed, and I'm hearing through the wall. They just loud with their friends, but then in the morning when they should be up, they snoring. It's time to go to church. They snoring, and I'm like, hey, you need to change. But even as a baby, they were not always asleep at night. There were times my wife and I, she makes me laugh about this. This child would find his way in the kitchen and get his snacks while we were asleep, and and we had to finally put him on the counter so he would kill himself in the cabinet. And then he thought we were sleeping one day. It was so hot that summer, and we were in the living room sleeping. And she noticed. She said, "Don't move." She tapped me. She said, "Look on the floor." He was crawling with his snacks under his neck, watching TV while we thought he was asleep in the bed. He got the TV on low decibels, so he thinks it wouldn't irritate us, and he did that all the time. And so even now, as he's a young man, I'm always after him about making sure he gets home early so he can go to rest and go to bed. And then but a lot of times I look at the anxiety from school,
Yes.
trying to keep up and be competitive. Could be parts that sets it off as a trigger. And I look at that. My mom, in her age, I notice I'll call her in the morning and she sounds really like she's asleep. That's because she just went to bed at 4 or 5 o'clock that morning because she was up all night. And I say, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm just taking papers and, me, child, putting receipts down." I'm like, "Are you serious?" From 8 p.m. to 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning, and then in the house by herself. So now we're my siblings and I are thinking about doing some things to give her that comfort so she doesn't feel like she's by herself in the house. And that could be a reason, like you talked about terrors, nights, could be night terrors where she feels not safe to go to bed and sleep all night safely, thinking, because part of her neighborhood is kind of crazy, and so she's probably thinking, and her house is solely secure. She's so secure, even in her mind, she wants to put other measures in the house, and I'm like, if I do all that and a fire breaks out, you can't get out, we can't get in, we ain't doing all that, lady. But you're right. So depression, we have to take note of those signs, because everybody could be giving us signs, and we just got to be more attentive to those things, especially sleep deprivations and all those.
Deprivation is very important. Another sign is weight or appetite changes. For some people, fluctuating weight or rapid weight loss could be one of the warning signs of a mental health disorder, such as depression or an eating disorder. And sometimes when an individual is struggling with mental health, there's a rapid drop in weight. And there's a rapid drop in weight because they're not taking care of themselves the way that they used to. They're not eating healthy, or they're not eating at all. So those are things to be very observant about, to pay attention to. And sometimes our children, again, taking back to certain family members in my family who struggle with the mental illness, they would lose that weight because they were not eating. You will see them nibble here or nibble here. Now, these are individuals who love to eat, but then when that changes in eating, you're wondering like, oh, what's going on? Because you like to eat. You're not eating. Oh, I'm not really hungry. No, I'm just not really hungry. It's different things like that's a lie. It's usually a lie. Something's going on. They're either struggling with something, they're worried about something, something's weighing heavy on their mind, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it has evolved into a mental disorder at that time, but it's the start of something that could trigger a mental disorder, such as depression or something like that. So it's good to be very observant, and especially with our older individuals in our family, such as our mothers and different things. It had gotten to a point to where when I lost my second sibling, my mother was struggling with eating, and my mother was rapidly just dropping weight, dropping weight, dropping weight because she struggled with eating. And that was a sign that my mother was going through major depression at that time, because this was her child, so it we had to step in. We had to be in her face. We had to be in her home. We had to get involved. We had to conversate. We had to bring laughter. We had to bring food, and we had to make sure that she was eating. So pay attention to those different things when you see a rapid drop in weight. A rapid drop in weight could also mean that there is an illness. So it doesn't always mean that there's a mental disorder. There could be an illness, or there could be someone just doing something spiritual, such as fasting or anything. But just be observant and pay attention to those things.
I find also two examples. When I was going through a crisis in my life, I had no idea that I wasn't even eating.
Mm-hmm.
In my mind, I was eating because during the day I might have had this or that. And then again, I waned from eating altogether. I remember that part of the crises where I didn't even want to eat because I was going through the crises, and the point that the eating attributed to me actually taking the time to think.
Mm-hmm.
So if I was eating, I would be sitting there, and then I had to think while I was eating. So if I didn't eat, I stayed busy. I was doing that. And also on the other side, my wife, and I want to encourage women who are watching this. My wife had our second child, and the thing was, we had one baby, and not that I did this on purpose, but she got pregnant actually about on the 7th or 8th week after we were supposed to be, not doing anything. So now she's pregnant again. So her body had no time to really regroup and heal and process. So now, after having the second baby, I want to encourage women not to take on that onus or that mindset that you look terrible, or you're overweight and all. And then you get to a point that you recognize those things, but then it becomes an oppression. And so now you're overwhelmed with, you want to lose weight, and before you know it, you're still eating, and now you're mad at yourself, and then so it's a mental anguish. So women who have children, my daughter just had a baby, and I was encouraging her because she said, and it's good that she can feel that already. It wasn't full blown, but she was feeling the postpartum, and she was able to address it and look at it. And then with me and her friend and others who are helping her mentally, physically with the baby, giving her time off and telling her, you need to go to bed while we have the baby. Go outside and walk around, at least get some air in your face. So you're right. It doesn't have to be mental illness at its peak. But it could be a beginning stage where we have to be careful too, because overeating can come through as depression also. Those are things that you have to look at. And so with me, I'm trying to figure out really at my age, what am I doing? Either undereating or overeating. Either way go, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. And a lot of it is because of some stresses you have, either job related or just trying to keep up competitive, or dealing with paying tuition. I didn't even think about that until some things were hitting me hard with, if you're the person who does the paying this or paying that, you could be depressive too when you start noticing you got all these bills, you got things coming in, and sometimes if you don't think and pause and breathe, you'll say, I ain't got no money, and you really got money, but you're compiling everything on you at the same time, and you're not processing.
And that's good. I was going to say overeating as well, but overseer handled it well. So, yes, just be mindful of those things when you see a difference in eating patterns as well, or weight.
When you see, I don't want Oreo cookies, I'm depressed.
Ooh. Another sign is quiet or withdrawn. Withdrawn from life, especially if this is a major change, could indicate a mental health disorder. If a friend or loved one is regularly isolating themselves, they may have depression, bipolar disorder, a psychotic disorder, or another mental health disorder. Refusing to join in social activities may be a sign they need help. When you notice that someone who is not always quiet or not always withdrawn, always is in the crowd or talking and laughing and socializing, and all of a sudden, slowly they gradually begin to withdraw in themselves and they begin to get really quiet. Those are things to pay attention to. And it may or may not be anything, but then it may be something. It could be just that this person is at this time in their life, it's just, I got to focus on some things right now. So I'm going to take some quiet time to myself. I'm going to withdraw myself away from something. But if it's going on too long and you notice that it's getting out of hand and this person is really not socializing, not even at a small bit, is begin to start to ask questions. Start to ask questions, and simple questions would be, hey, are you all right? Is it anything you want to talk about? Are you struggling with anything? Or, you're going through something? Hey, let's have lunch. Let's go out for tea, or different things like that. And just begin to engage yourself in that individual's life, because we may not know, the quietness and withdrawing may not be anything, but then it may be everything. So, get yourself involved and just take the person out for tea, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask a question. The only thing that they can tell you is, you know what, I need you to mind your business. Or, you know what, no, I'm actually okay. I'm just taking some time to myself right now. And it's okay. At least you made the effort to step in where you felt that there needed to be step in. Anytime you see a change, it's better to ask questions and try to step in than to ignore or just say, no, they'll be okay. Oh, no, they are fine. They're fine. They'll bounce back. They may not bounce back. So just be mindful of that, and just,
Pay attention, because sometimes people are crying out silently, and sometimes it's a lack of communication that they're don't know even how to communicate that they want to be back in the crowd, but they have become so withdrawn. The word is used sometimes, introvert. Everybody is not always born an introvert. Some introversions are acquired, and it could be because of triggers or traumas, right. And they figure, well, I'm always getting in trouble with this, or people always mess with me, so I'll just pull back. And so again, be very careful to always speak to the person and try to inquire.
Yes. Another sign and symptom would be substance abuse. We know that using substances and drinking alcohol is a coping mechanism. It helps you hide. It suppresses everything that you're struggling with. If you notice that an individual is starting to, and it may start off with something simple as taking Tylenol just to relax. It may start off with something like ibuprofen just to relax the mind. And then they may go to the doctor and try to want something else for some pain that they may not have, and different things like that. And then it evolves into something else. They may smoke marijuana, and different things like that. Why are you smoking marijuana? Because it relaxes my mind, and I don't have to, I don't really focus on anything, or it lays me back, and different things like that. Something could be wrong. So just watch those signs, especially if they were just moderately smoking marijuana and then you notice that there's an increase. Crack cocaine use, Lortabs. Lortabs, we know, helps you sleep all day long if you want to. So an individual that's taking Lortabs to just not deal, that's an issue. And if they're on pain medication and all of a sudden you notice that they're taking more pain medication than they should, they're going through something, they're trying to deal with something, their body have now become dependent on something, and they could be just trying to deal with something. So it's good to get involved and ask questions and say, hey, you're going through your script a little bit faster. Is it something, you might want to talk to your doctor, or different things like that. And they may tell you to mind your business, and it's okay. It's okay. Just mind your business, but secretly stay involved.
That's right. I would say that I have people in the family and friends who started off with what they call pain management.
Yes.
And they got hooked. Because the feeling of being away from the pain and or away from whatever that is that was stressing them, yes. they got common with that. I remember, and I'm not always not trying to be transparent, but I remember years ago, my wife and I, we were together, and we just got married, and of course I never was a drinker, never drunk anything like that. My family had people in the family who drink and all that. Some are what you call social drinkers, some just drink every day. So I decided, we were going to eat dinner one day, and they offered us, well, wine or something, and I said, "Oh, I'll take a glass of wine." My wife was like, "Look, Reverend, you don't need no wine." And so I drank a little bit of the wine, but the feeling I got was like it was like a buzz, like you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, you know what? The Bible said, "A little wine for the belly," you know. But you have to really be careful because
Wisdom.
you could become intoxicated mentally beyond the fact of the physical intoxication
Yes.
because you'll start patterning yourself that you need this, and so
Mm-hmm.
be very careful of that. And if you see someone who started out with just a little of this and now it's becoming moderate and now it's becoming more than moderate, then you need to have a conversation with them to make sure that they understand that you're looking out for them and you're trying to make sure you can help them process, even
Right.
if it's a conversation that could help. My wife helped me. I'm not one of those preaching drinkers, you know. I could have been, but thank God for my wife. I didn't have a problem either. I just wanted to see what it was if we drink some wine. So I got a little taste, but I'm all right now, praise the Lord. Oh, taste, see the Lord is good. Hallelujah.
And it's always good to be watchful because we don't know. We don't know. And substance is one of those things that we use to not deal, to not think about stuff, but to not worry or to not deal with it, to take it away per se. But is it really taking it away? No. The only thing a substance does is suppress it long enough for you to forget about it for a moment. But the time when you begin to come out of that drug and that alcohol, that situation begins to rises up again, and now you find yourself using again to suppress it more, and all you do is constantly piling things up on top of each other. So be mindful of that and just watch. Even when your children or young individuals are smoking marijuana, it's not always for socialization. It's not always for recreational use. Sometimes they're really going through something, and that marijuana,
Hmm.
it relaxes them
Wow.
for the moment that they're in it. So just be mindful and watchful of those things. The feeling of guilty and worthless is another sign, as signs, and this one is very tricky because this one could lead to suicide thoughts, and it can all actually lead to suicide. Feeling guilty and worthless could also lead to self-harm, where an individual now is cutting themselves, um, having suicidal thoughts, attempting suicide. So the feeling of guilty and worthlessness, is signs of mental health disorder. It can start off as depression, um, um, being criticized, or criticizing themselves, being criticized by others, blaming themselves, being blamed for things by others. And when severe, a person may express a feeling to hurt or kill themselves. So these are things to watch for. If you notice someone always feeling guilty, or they're feeling worthless, or they're constantly blaming themselves for something, they're constantly criticizing themselves, constantly looking at themselves with low self-esteem and different things like that. That is a major time, and especially our young children. This one is a big one for them because self-esteem plays a huge role. I don't like the way I look. I don't like the way I feel. I'm fat. I'm too skinny. They're always criticizing themselves or looking at themselves low because of what they see in society, or because of what they've seen on social media, or because of what someone said to them. It's a thing called social media bullying. There's a things called school bullying, neighborhoods bullying. There's all types of bullying that we really need to pay attention to, because a feeling of guilty or worthless can lead an individual to suicide, or having suicidal thoughts, or it could lead someone to cutting themselves and, doing self-harm. So pay attention to especially our young people. This one is a big one when it comes to our young individuals.
I find too, we have so much coming at us in our world. The media has amped up so many things. They got this thing now where you could be on your phone, and I don't know, I forgot the phrase again, but you could change your face. You could add to your face and change the way your skin looks and your hair filters. And when I was growing up, the greatest thing that we challenged with as young men was it was a book called GQ and the Gentleman's Quarterly. So we would compare ourselves to the GQ magazine and or Jet. We would look at all the things that you see in Jet or Ebony or Essence or Vogue or back in those days they had other books that Cosmopolitan. So now it's more advanced. I mean, everywhere you turn a TV commercial, they're talking about this pill for that, this pill for that. Get your biceps, triceps, six pack back. Even men now are faced more with this erectile dysfunction. I mean, it's so much coming at you. So you have to pay attention to all the things that are coming at you that distract you and take your mind off of being that real image that God has made you, and you can't let things become so clouded in your iCloud, your mind, that you become you start feeling you're worthless. Well, you got to face it. If you're not 25 and you're 55 or you're 45, you can't do what you did in those years, and you can't compete with your sons and your nephews and college kids and high school kids. You got to learn how to appreciate who you are and look good even in the stages and the places you are. There are a lot of people over 50 who look wonderful. Matter of fact, some of them look better than the ones that are younger than them because of the way you live. You have to encourage yourself, eat right, have the right diet. And I'm not talking about eating diet, but a mental diet.
Yes.
Purge yourself.
Yes.
Pull things off from you at night when you do your meditation. Pull away those thoughts that you thought about yourself or things you saw that would make you feel intimidated or anxious about not being this or not being that. I am so excited. I could remember jumping down all 15 stairs at my mom's house. Now I'm happy I can walk up 15 stairs. So you got to make fun. You got to turn it around. And so those are things that can help you not feel so worthless, because it depends on your perception.
Yes.
Depends on how you're perceiving
Yes.
things that
Yes.
make you feel that you're not, and really you're probably more greater than what you even give yourself credit for.
Usually we are.
Yeah.
Usually we are more greater. It's just that society has put blinders over our young people's eyes that causes them to see things that are not real.
Because even in school, coaches were guilty of this. They would push some kids because they were avid runners or better swimmers,
Yeah.
or better jumpers, high jumpers, and so we got to be careful, even if we are mentors to people, that we don't make people feel worthless when they get through hearing us. We have to learn to encourage people,
Yes.
even in their failures, to know that it's not the end of the world and it's okay. And that's how we're going to learn from this. We're going to be successful by looking at what we couldn't do or didn't do to get better. So those are, some of the things that we have to pay attention to as well.
Yes. So now let's talk about some risk factors. So when we're looking at risk factors, they may include things: a history of mental illness in a blood relative, such as a parent or sibling, and they want to call this inherited. Now, we as Christians, we call it something else. We're looking at, we say, transference of spirits.
Yes.
Because when an individual passes away, say a mother, and I'm dealing with this in a family as well. Both her parents had passed away. And I find her dealing with the same issues that both her parents had dealt with, from schizophrenia to bipolar, hallucinations, depression, and different things like that. So, like I said, as a clinician, we say inherited, but as a woman of God, I say transference. So I have to give it to you from the natural. I also have to give it to you from the spiritual, because I also have to stick to God's word. So when we also look at risk factors, we want to say stressful life situations, such as financial problems, a loved one's death, or divorce. That's a risk factor. When you lose a loved one, finances, especially finances in a marriage, even finances as being a single parent, those things can be stressful when you're trying to provide as a single parent, or when you're working together in a marriage, and you have one working and doing the right thing and one not doing the right thing, or you're both not doing the right thing, it could be very stressful, and that could lead to mental illness, because now you're becoming depressed, you're becoming regretful, you're becoming angry, you're becoming frustrated, and those things could lead to minor depressive disorders to major depressive disorders. So just noticing the risk factors, and pay attention to it in your own life. Loved one's death or divorce. Some men go through a divorce, women go through a divorce. That's now you might feel lonely. You might feel like, now what am I going to do? I absolutely have nothing. My life depended on this person. My everything was surrounded around this person. And especially when you have individuals who've been married for 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years, and all of a sudden they divorce. Your world has been flipped. So those are risk factors to look for. Brain damage, and we call those TBIs, traumatic brain injuries, and that's a violent blow to the head that has now knocked off your transmitters and different things like that. It has actually now has knocked you off course, and you have some brain damage there. That can lead to mental illness, because we know our brain functions, our body functions with our brain, and blood and stuff is pumped from the heart to the brain. So the thing is that if we have this hard blow to the head, it can cause some severe damage, where now we may come delayed. We may have now a learning disability. We may now have, where we now with not just a physical disability, but now we have the mental disability, because now we're not mentally focused. So those are things to pay attention to. Traumatic experiences, such as military combat or assault. Individuals who have been shot. People in the military. We have a lot of military veterans that are struggling with mental illness, and we see a lot of them, they're out on the streets, they're homeless. Not because they want to be, because they really don't know how to go after the help that's out there for them. And they need that guidance. But some of them are very unapproachable, because they can become violent. They can become, they can be untouchable. They could be non-approachable, and they can become violent. So we tend to just walk by them and not do anything. But I thank God that there are now services that are now rising up to help our veterans out there, because I think we as a nation owe that to them.
We do.
To make sure that they're mentally stable.
Are there any questions that's coming across? None? Okay. And so that's a good observation, especially with our veterans. And we have such great respect for those who served the country and gave their lives, gave their mind, gave what they had to support and make our nation great and safe. Yes. And I noticed that right now the veterans there are better opportunities for them to be assisted in their living. The government is passing more laws and giving up more funding for them to get help mentally, get housing properly, medicine, and also management in medicine.
Yes.
And you said something that kind of made me think, especially those who probably were in like Vietnam or the Persian Gulf or in those conflicts. I now got a mindset different, and I'm gonna, when you get to that scripture too, I was gonna look at how that works, because I think sometimes the people who are homeless, especially those that were veterans, are actually reliving the combat zone. Yes. And so we're thinking they're homeless because they want to be outside. I think their mind went all the way back to when they were in those islands and those lands, those rice paddies and those minefields, the battlefield. And so they're reliving it while in their own local, and so they lost the mindset of the locality. Their whole setting, their whole mind, their whole spirit is in that war zone. Yes. And that could be something when we're looking out to help those veterans to start thinking about, could it be we could do some paintings in areas that will kind of help gravitate them to, if they see this certain painting, it reminds them of the war zone, yet there's something in the painting that can drive them to the exit point. So maybe that's something we could think about moving forward, is do some more things that would be more picturesque, that could help them be stimulated to exit out of the war zone.
Yes.
You know?
And I mentioned in the first segment that there are, music therapy, there's art therapy, water therapy, equine therapy, so many different therapies out there that are just natural therapies that do work, So it's just getting the individual to not so much as cooperate, but agree to
To accept
receiving
it.
help.
I find people when they're going to rehab, your higher end rehabs have those streams of water, palm trees, fruit. I know they use fruit a lot.
It's
Certain
natural eating.
foods, music therapy, dance therapy, meditation therapy. They have them even walking.
So many things.
All the things. So I'm looking at, I'm asking God, even in the church, what are some things that we could do, even with our own church, to stimulate people to want to be healthy? Because some people don't know how to reach out to get the help.
Right.
And because of the depression or the onset of it or the beginning onset of it, they don't know how to come out of that. So is there a way that the church could stimulate people to feel, I want to go to church? Because in church they find there's either a picture there, there's the way the music is displayed, there's a soothing presence, they feel calm. So, when I thought about growing up as a kid, especially with church, the organist and the pianist started the preludes, and you knew church was beginning because there was nothing said, but the music was bright, it drew you in, and then the pastor gets up and talks about, be still, the Lord is with us and all, and then testimony service comes in. So there could be something that we could think about in the present and future to help assist and aid people in those times where they feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, natural therapies, natural things that they can do. Even healthy eating helps.
Yes.
Healthy eating helps a lot.
Thank you, Miss Michelle Obama. The students are just upset with you probably, but it's helping out, I'm sure.
This one is a major one because I find this has happened with a lot of adults, and it has been unaddressed childhood issues. So a childhood history of abuse or neglect. And that's a major one because we have individuals who have had a history of childhood abuse and neglect who have now become in their adulthood. And these issues have never been addressed. And now that they have come into a place of having major mental disorder, and trying to work with them now can be very hard or very difficult, because now we have to take them back to where the abuse began, and now try to give them a way of coping with it, because it has been locked in them and their behaviors are reflecting something have been wrong, but we have not been able to notice what have been wrong because they haven't talked about it, they hid it. And some children have been called names, not good names, but names all the time. You're stupid, you're dumb, you're never going to amount to anything, I regret having you, and different things. These are all things that affect their life, so individuals having the history of childhood abuse and childhood neglect, physical beatings, sexual beatings, or sexual encounters with adults, or even sexual encounters with older children, relatives, sometimes it happens so often in your own family, and we don't address that issue, or we don't deal with that issue. We want to keep it on a hush hush. Why? Because we don't want people to look at our family like that. Hey, guess what? Your family did it. They're guilty. You got to address it. Why? Because now you're sending a child into a world with hidden trauma or suppressed trauma, which is going to have an impact on that child for the rest of that child's life until it is addressed.
And a lot of times, I often have given my testimony about being in a setting or in a family where you've been molested, and I didn't know what anger issues really was. I got married, and I started addressing things because I was mandated actually to go to a anger management class. And those classes were at least, I think it was 6 months or so, the first set. And in there, I really was able to tap into what was really what caused the anger. I had been in church,
Mm-hmm.
in my
Mm-hmm.
career, and all kind of things going on positives. I'm like, where did this come from? And then we trickle it down to the one question came across: have you ever been violated, or were you ever told no, or were you ever having to keep a secret?
Mm-hmm.
And when you started peeling all that apart, I'm
We
like, well, I
start
remember
pulling
all of
it.
those things that I was told. And so, because it was addressed, then it was easier to be in a relationship healthy.
Healthy
I think a lot of
relationships.
times we don't understand that some people can't even stay in relationships because there are certain things that they have not have had unearthed or have not had dealt with. And sometimes it's not that you can't keep a partner or you can't be with a person. There could be things that you have never dealt with or had to
Mm-hmm.
hide or were ashamed to talk about it, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sad part is when you still got to deal with the person who perpetrated this on you, and you still see them and they're married or they're going on about their life, and it's like they act like just get over it. We were, and here's the key that really unlocked the door for me was when you were told, "Oh, you were kids then, you don't really know anything." Hurt is hurt, whether it's
Hurt
to
is
a
hurt.
child or an adult, and so those are the things I think we talk factors that we've got to really address as well. Is don't be afraid to find someone who can give you the help, and don't be afraid to open up and really let it all out because you're only hurting yourself keeping it hidden. Taking people say I'll take it to my grave. Well, there's some things you don't have to be buried with. Some things you don't should be. Some things you shouldn't be resurrected out of all of that. You should have already unearthed that. And I'm a witness that it's healthy to talk about it. And in some cases, if you can, deal with the person who was the perpetrator,
Yes.
who violated you, and let them know that I remember what happened. You want to play like it never happened, but it did. And then as a parent, if your child comes to you or if you're a caregiver, be open-minded.
Listen.
Don't shut them down. Don't say, well,
Listen.
you don't know, and don't say that now. Why talk about it now? Well, talk about it whenever you need to talk about it. It doesn't matter if people don't want to hear it. You talk about it because it's healthy and it helps you process, and you can live longer and healthier.
Yes. And there is a therapy out there, and I absolutely love this therapy. Is called being trauma informed. And so when you do trauma informed therapy, you're addressing the issue in a healthy manner where you're not re traumatizing the individual. You're actually taking your time with them for as long as they need
Good.
to address that situation. And I practice that in my own home with my own children. And, not that they're going through anything major, but I just practice trauma informed. I talk to them the way that I want to be talked to. I deal with them the way that I want to be dealt with in efforts not to bring up issues that may re-hurt them or different things like that, but speak and talk about it when they're ready. So being trauma informed as to not to re-traumatize or re-hurt the person or force the individual to talk about different things that are very painful and that they very well may not be ready to address, but always hold it in the back of your mind that this is something that we do need to address one day, because I do want my child and I do want myself to live a healthy life. And as long as I'm holding this over my head and my child is holding it over their head, or my mother's holding it over her head, or my dad's holding it over his head, we're never going to be healthy emotionally or mentally. And always sometimes remember that the perpetrator has possibly been through some form of trauma as well.
And also note as a parent, be honest with your children.
Yes.
Sometimes you got to tell your children sometimes the reason why you're saying don't do this, don't do that, because it's because of what happened to you. Sometimes your children can even help you heal even more if you're honest with them and you let them know the reason why I don't want you to stay over so and so's house is because when I was a young child, I had no way of knowing this, but things can happen in your home. So teach them how to be observant, teach them how to not be so free-willed and accepting everything. Don't drink everything, don't eat everything, don't always be happy to go to everybody's house or one person's house in particular. If your perimeter is being invaded, teach them that it's not okay to just laugh it off, but express that to the individual that you're gone too far, the hug was too tight, I don't do that kind of thing. I'm not sleeping in the bed with you. I'm not sleeping, So teach them and talk to them about the things that they should be aware of, so that they won't feel intimidated or feel bad
Yes.
about addressing it. Because
Yes.
sometimes if we don't talk to our kids, something happens to them. They don't know what to say, don't know how to say it, and then the
Yes.
perpetrator can keep doing it to them over and over again because they feel, well, I'm here and I won't say this, that my uncle or my nephew or my cousin or my
Yes.
brother or my sister, step brother or whatever. It doesn't make a difference. So
Yeah.
so always open up to your children and share with them if there were some things that you went through, as much as they can handle. Teach them and talk to them, because that'll teach them how to have, as you said, the trauma
Informed.
informed. Yeah.
Yes, it's very important. When I worked with children, I saw so much mental illness as a result of sexual abuse, as a result of being put down all their life. They're having low self-esteem, having low self-image, and different things like that. So just be very mindful. It's very, very important to talk with your children. Even at the dinner table, I think we need to go back to having family
At
dinner.
the dinner table, yes.
At the dinner table is the
Yes.
best way to start a discussion. Put the electronics down, let's sit at the table, let's eat, let's talk, let's laugh, and let's address issues that we're struggling with, so that it doesn't lead to mental illness.
I want to get to this. I know it's going to be cut off and we got to probably revisit it again. But Matthew chapter 8, and you talked about chapter 8, 28.
Yes,
Let's look at that
sir.
for just a moment. Let's
Yes,
look at
sir.
that. And when he was come to the other side into the country of the Gergesenes,
Yes.
there met him two possessed with devils coming out of the tombs, exceeding fierce, so that no man might pass by that way. And behold, they cried out, saying, What have we to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God? Art thou come hither to torment us before the time? And there was a good way off from them, and herd of many swine feeding. So the devils besought him, saying, If thou cast us out, suffer us to go away into the herd of swine. And he said unto them, Go. And when they were come out, they went into the herd of swine, and behold, the whole herd of swine ran violently down a steep place into the sea, and perished in the waters.
Yes, these individuals are what we call mentally ill. In the Bible, they were possessed. They were schizo, they were bipolar, they did self-harm, they were violent, they were frustrated, they were angry. They had so much going on. How did they get this way? They became oppressed with demons. So the world now has given it the word mental illness. And how do we look at mental illness? We talk about medications, which are helpful, and I would never downplay medications, because like we talked about in the last two segments, this very well may be where the individual is now. They are at that medication point, and we never want to deter them from where they feel safe. The moment you make them feel unsafe, you've lost them. So work with them and walk with them, and when they're ready for deliverance, then we can do what Jesus did.
And that's good. As we are about to pause and close, I am really excited that we have shared with you as much as we were able in relation to the church and the voice of the church, and how we're looking at assisting, causing those to address, and then those who are ready to start dealing with it, how to get that process beginning. And we're grateful to you, Lady Hunt, for all the input you've given to us as a clinician, and also as a person who's worked with those who've had those type of things that happen to them. And we're able to look at it both naturally and spiritually. I pray that you have gained some insight. I pray that if you're dealing with something or know of someone who's dealing with something, that you've taken some notes. We want you to know, I believe it's that number is 988.
Yes,
There's
the
a there's
mental health hotline.
a hotline for the mental health. Dial 988 at any time. There will be always someone there to assist you and help you. And then by chance, if you can't remember that number and you remember this one, 716 884 7925, that's our church number. Call and ask for Lady Tracy Hunt or Pastor Alan Core, and we'll be glad to talk with you. And if we can't do anything for you ourselves, we know how to point you to those directions.
Yes.
Again, thank you for sharing your time with us, and we hope that we've been a blessing to you. Remember, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you.
Amen.
And so understand, he's able to keep you in perfect peace if you just keep your mind stayed on him. God bless you, and thank you again, and may the grace of God be upon you and your family.